Arizona Territory, June 1883. The desert wind cut like a whip as Priscilla Dearing kicked her blood-slicked boots into the stirrups and urged the exhausted mare forward, heart pounding louder than the hooves beneath her. Behind her, the smoke still curled from the roof of the ranch house she had once called home. Her cruel husband, Silas, left groaning beneath the wreckage. She did not know if he lived, and she did not care. She only knew she had to put miles between herself and that nightmare before the sun rose full over the canyon rim. Her lip was split. Her ribs ached from his last drunken blow. The bruises on her arms would bloom purple by morning. But she was free for now. "I will not die his wife," she whispered to the wind, her voice raw from tears and dust. She rode west, where the land broke into redstone and silence. The trail narrowed. By dusk, the horse stumbled and collapsed near a dry arroyo. Priscilla rolled from the saddle, dust in her mouth, hands trembling as she tried to lift the canteen. Empty. When she woke, the stars had shifted, and someone was watching her. He stood tall, arms folded across his chest, face unreadable in the moonlight. His shoulders were bare, painted in earthy ochres. An obsidian pendant hung from his neck, catching the silver light. The others behind him, 4 men on foot, stood silent, waiting on his word. Priscilla scrambled back, heart thudding. "Please," she rasped. "I am not here to harm anyone." The man stepped forward, his voice low and calm. "You are dying." She nodded once, too tired to lie. He knelt and offered her a small pouch of water. His dark eyes never left hers. "I am Leotie Chaska," he said. "Chief of the Ndi, what you call Apache. You are on our land." Priscilla drank. The water ran down her chin, blessedly cool. "I did not mean to trespass. I had no place else to go." He studied her, then offered his hand. "Then you will come with us." She hesitated. But his hand was steady, warm. Her fingers closed around his. They moved on foot through the night. She stumbled often, and each time, Leotie was there steadying her with a touch to her elbow or lifting her gently onto his horse when she could no longer walk. He said little, but his presence calmed the dread still eating at her. By dawn, they reached a hidden valley nestled beyond the cliffs, where a stream ran clear and low wooden lodges housed the Ndi families. Children peered from behind skirts. Elders watched with quiet eyes. Leotie spoke in his language, and the tension in the camp eased. A woman with long silver braids brought her food. Another gave her a blanket and pointed to a small lodge near the edge of the stream. That night, Priscilla sat alone outside her shelter, staring at the moonlight on the water. Her fingers trembled still. "You are safe here," a voice said behind her. She turned. Leotie stood a few paces away, arms crossed. His voice was softer than before. "Do not fear us," he added. "I do not," she whispered. "I fear what I left behind." He stepped closer slowly. "Was it your husband who did that to your face?" She nodded. Leotie's jaw tightened. "Then you will not go back." "I cannot," she said. "I would rather die out here." "You will not die." His voice held quiet certainty. "Not while I draw breath." They stood in silence for a long time. Then he turned and left her to the stars. Over the next weeks, Priscilla helped where she could, gathering roots, grinding corn, learning the rhythms of a life untouched by white towns and cruel men. She never asked to stay, but no one asked her to leave either. Leotie came and went, always watching her from a distance. He spoke little, but when he did, it was with a quiet respect that settled something deep in her. One evening, as the sun burned low and orange behind the cliffs, she found him by the stream, washing his hands. "You knew I was running," she said. He nodded. "A woman does not ride into the desert alone unless her soul is bleeding." She sat beside him on the sun-warmed rock. "You saved me." "You saved yourself," he said. "I only gave you water." She looked at him then, really looked. His face was strong, with deep-set eyes that had seen more than most. A thin scar ran along his jaw. There was pain there, too. And something else, something steady. Have you ever been married? She asked. His eyes flicked to hers, then away. Once. Many years ago. She died bearing our son. I am sorry. He nodded, not speaking. They sat in silence again, the stream whispering around their boots. That night, as Priscilla lay beneath the woven blankets, she thought of his voice, the quiet weight of it. She thought of his hands, strong and careful. She thought of how he had watched her not like a man claiming something, but like a man seeing someone. And for the first time in years she slept without dreaming of fists or fire. Days passed. Then a week. She laughed more. The bruises faded. Her ribs healed. She brushed a little girl's hair by the fire, helped string corn to dry, and walked beside the stream each morning. One afternoon, she found Leotie waiting at the edge of the camp. He held a small carved pendant shaped like a sun. For you, he said. She blinked. I cannot take this. It is protection, he said. And choice. She looked up at him. What choice? He stepped closer, close enough she could feel the warmth radiating off him. To stay. If that is what your heart wants. Her throat tightened. And if I do? His voice was steady. Then you will never be alone again. She stared at the pendant, then at him. Her heart swelled with something quiet and huge. She took the carving and closed her fingers around it. I want to stay. He exhaled, just once, and his eyes softened. He reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek, his fingers lingering. Her breath caught. She leaned into his touch. And when he kissed her slow and sure, it was not like Silas, not like any man she had ever known. There was no possession in it. Only care. Only warmth. Only love beginning to bloom. The kind she had dreamed of her whole life. And this time, she would not run. The monsoon clouds came early that year. By the close of July, the sky bruised with weight each afternoon, and distant thunder rolled across the red hills like a hollow drumbeat. The scent of creosote and wet stone clung to the air, thick as memory. Priscilla stood beneath the awning of a drying hut, shaking rain from a woven mat. Her sleeves were damp, her hands calloused from weeks of work. She had learned to mend baskets, to set rabbit snares, to understand the rhythm of a place that asked for quiet attention instead of obedience. Her skin had darkened under the sun, and her eyes no longer flinched when men passed too near. She looked up as Leotie approached from the ridge, his horse walking slow behind him. His leggings were streaked with mud, the leather dark from the passing storm. He led the animal with one hand and carried a wrapped bundle under the other arm. You've been gone 2 nights, she said, stepping forward. I thought maybe the floodwaters caught you. His gaze flicked to the sky. South Trail washed out near the pass. I waited it. She reached for the bundle, but he held it a moment longer before handing it to her. It's for you. Inside, wrapped in deer hide, was a pair of boots handmade, the stitching neat, the soles soft from oil. She brushed her fingers over the beadwork along the collar, a row of small white stars, each one stitched with care. These are beautiful, she murmured. I saw you limping 2 days ago, he said, not looking away. The old one said your shoes were worn through. She swallowed. I didn't think you noticed. I notice more than I speak, he said, then turned to lead the horse toward water. That evening she waited by the fire circle, the boots beside her. Rain had cleared, but the earth still breathed steam. Children ran past, yelling toward the dusk. A pot simmered nearby, the scent of wild onion and hare mixing with smoke. When Leotie came to sit across from her, she didn't speak at first. She handed him a bowl, and they ate in silence as dusk settled. After a while she said, Do you ever think of leaving this place? He shook his head once. The land raised me. My people are here. My dead are here. She stared into the fire. When I was a girl, I used to dream of Missouri. Not because I'd been. Just because it was farther than Kansas. You still want to leave? I don't know. That dream feels like it belonged to someone else. Someone who didn't know what it cost to run. He adjusted a log in the fire with a stick. Sparks lifted into the dark. You are not running anymore. She tipped her head. A part of me still is. I wake up and forget where I am. I brace for doors slamming, footsteps behind me. Leotie didn't interrupt. I keep wondering if I'll ever stop waiting for the past to find me. She said. Time does not erase wounds. He said. It teaches you to carry them. She looked at him across the flame. And what do you carry, Leotie? His jaw shifted slightly. When my wife died, I buried her with a stone from this valley. One she found herself. I kept another. It's in my lodge. Some mornings I hold it before I rise. She didn't speak. The quiet held between them, not empty, but full. He added, You do not have to forget what was done to you to find peace here. She nodded slowly. I don't want to forget. I just want to stop being afraid of remembering. He reached across the fire then, not touching her, but holding his hand palm up between them. She placed hers atop it. You are not alone, he said. The fire snapped once, and the stars began to show through the thinning cloud. Later, as she lay in her lodge with the new boots beside her bedroll, she touched the edge of the beadwork again. The stars stitched into the leather reminded her of something unspoken, how care could be quiet, how love didn't always arrive with thunder, but with steady hands and small offerings. She closed her eyes and listened to the night. No footsteps chased her. No doors slammed in anger. Only wind in the trees and the soft breath of a life being built. By late August, the valley gave itself over to late summer stillness. The stream ran slower, its bed littered with wind-blown cottonwood leaves. The children spent long hours chasing lizards between the rocks, and the women moved more slowly in the heat, shading their faces with woven fans and speaking in soft tones as they worked. Priscilla spent her mornings near the stone ridge, helping a widowed elder named Nazcha gather wild tobacco and strip its leaves for drying. Nazcha spoke little English, but her hands were sure, and Priscilla had learned her rhythms well enough to follow without words. One morning, as they rested beneath a split juniper, Nazcha reached into her pouch and placed a small, smooth bone into Priscilla's palm. It was carved with a spiral and worn from years of handling. For a new path, the old woman said, gesturing to Priscilla's chest, then out toward the horizon. You walk it strong. Priscilla nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. She tucked the bone into her dress pocket, and thanked her with a quiet touch to her shoulder. That evening, Leotie returned from a gathering of neighboring bands. He arrived after dusk, his horse lathered and eyes drawn. A child spotted him first and ran to alert the others. Priscilla stood from the fire and stepped into the shadowed edge of the circle as he approached. You're back, she said. He nodded once and handed her a wrapped bundle. Inside was a length of dyed cloth deep rust red, edged with turquoise thread. For your lodge opening, he said. She looked up from the fabric. My what? The women spoke to me. They are building you a lodge of your own. It will be finished in 3 days' time. Her fingers tightened on the cloth. I didn't ask for that. You earned it, he said. You've worked alongside them. They no longer see you as passing through. She looked past him, toward the gathering families. And you? What do you see me as? He studied her face, the firelight flickering across his features. Someone who's finding her way. She folded the cloth and held it close. I didn't think I'd be wanted anywhere. Not for who I am anyway. You are not who you were when you arrived, he said. And that is not a shameful thing. Later, Priscilla sat in the half-finished frame of what would be her lodge, watching the sky turn violet. A basket of cedar bark and corn husks sat beside her, waiting to be shaped into a lining for the walls. She heard the soft tread of footsteps and didn't turn. You're quiet tonight, Leotie said from behind her. I don't know how to belong to something without waiting for it to be taken away. He sat beside her, his knees brushing hers. When I was a boy, my father told me the earth does not ask you to own it. Only to listen. to walk it with care. That is what makes you part of it. She leaned her shoulder against his. And people? They are harder. She smiled faintly. I want to trust this. You. Myself. You do not have to want, he said gently. You already do. She turned to him, her eyes searching his in the fading light. I wake up thinking of your voice before I remember my own name. He didn't answer with words. His hand slid over hers, calloused and warm, and he lifted her fingers to his chest, pressing them flat against the place his heart beat steady beneath his shirt. Then let us stop remembering who we were, he said, and start learning who we are together. She leaned forward, her forehead resting lightly against his, the silence between them full of things finally unspoken. And when the stars rose, neither of them moved, because there was no longer reason to run. By early September, the valley held the promise of harvest. Dry stalks of maize rustled in the warm breeze, and the women walked the rows with woven baskets slung at their hips, humming low songs that carried through the dust. Priscilla moved among them with the quiet ease of someone who'd stopped asking where she belonged. That morning, she had risen before the sun, the sky still bruised with night, and stepped barefoot into the cold stream. She'd taken to doing that lately, just standing in the moving water, watching the light rise slow over the canyon rim. It steadied her. The ache in her chest that once stirred with every dawn had dulled into something soft and manageable. She dried her feet with the edge of her skirt and started back toward her lodge, only to find Leotie crouched outside it, fletching an arrow with turkey feathers. You always walk the stream before light? He asked without looking up. It's quiet then, she said, pausing. I like how the air smells before the sun touches it. He tied the sinew with a careful pull. I used to do the same after my father died. I thought if I stood still long enough, I might hear his voice in the current. She sat beside him on the packed dirt. Did you? No. But I stopped expecting it. That helped more. She watched his fingers work. Do you go out often? He nodded. Less than I used to. My men know the trails well now. They guide without needing me to lead. You trust them. They've earned it. Same as you've earned your place here. She traced a line in the dirt beside her knee. I never thought I'd stay in one place long enough to be seen. You've been seen since the first night. When she looked over, his eyes met hers without hesitation. There was no rush behind them, no pressure. Just a quiet certainty that made her chest tighten. He set the arrow aside and leaned back on his palms. The elders asked if I'd take a second voice when we meet with the Southern Band next week. Her brow furrowed. Second voice? One who speaks beside me. One I trust to see what I might miss. She glanced down. You want me to go? I wouldn't have asked if I didn't. She hesitated. I'm not from here. I wouldn't know what to say. You listen when others don't. You notice small things. That matters more than words. She looked out toward the hills, their edges softened by the rising heat. I'll come. His nod was almost imperceptible. Good. That evening, she found herself seated beside the fire circle again, but this time, with a different stillness inside. A young girl wove reed strands around her wrist, humming a tune that wasn't meant to be remembered. Priscilla let the sound wash through her. Later, as the fire burned low and most had drifted off to sleep, Leotie rose from his place and extended a hand toward her. She took it without question. They walked beyond the edge of the camp, into the dark where only the stars lit their path. A coyote cried out in the distance, and the wind stirred low through the brush. He stopped near a flat stone outcrop and turned to face her. The night you came, I thought you would not last a week. I didn't think I would either. But you stayed, he said. And not because you had nowhere else to go. No, she said, voice low. Because I found something worth staying for. He reached for her then, not suddenly, but with the same thoughtfulness he gave to every movement. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing along her cheekbones. I do not make promises lightly, he said. I'm not asking for one. she whispered. I'm offering mine. The kiss was quiet. Not tentative, not uncertain but deliberate, like two people who had come through fire and still believed in the warmth of skin against skin. She felt his breath steady against her lips, and in that closeness, the last of her old fears slipped away like ash in wind. When they parted, she didn't step back. I've spent too long believing love was something to be endured, she said. Not chosen. He touched her forehead to his, eyes closed. Then let's choose it. Every day. They stood like that while the stars wheeled silently above them, two souls no longer lost, but found by their own hands, and by the steady grace of each other. By the time they reached the southern encampment, the days had shortened. The sun no longer lingered on the ridges, and the wind carried a sharper edge. Priscilla rode behind Leotie on his horse, her fingers light at his waist, her eyes steady on the horizon. They traveled 2 days over broken rock and dry arroyos, through country where sky met stone and silence kept company. The band they met was smaller, perhaps 30 souls gathered near a spring-fed hollow beneath a cliff face. The air smelled faintly of juniper and wood smoke. They were welcomed with nods and watchful eyes, and Leotie dismounted first, passing his reins to a boy no older than 12. He helped Priscilla down without a word, but his hand lingered at her back as they moved toward the fire circle. A council of 5 men waited, with 2 women seated slightly behind. Leotie greeted them indeed with a cadence that carried weight but little flourish. Priscilla stood beside him, hands clasped loosely at her waist. When the council turned their gaze on her, she met it without flinching. Later, as the council fire burned lower, a tall woman with thick gray plaits approached Priscilla and offered her a carved bone comb. Priscilla accepted it with both hands. You have spirit, the woman said in careful English, her voice rough but kind. Not many outsiders carry it well. I'm not trying to carry anything, Priscilla replied. I'm trying to live. The woman smiled faintly. You're doing both. That night, she and Leotie slept beneath a woven canopy, the stars just visible through the gaps in the reeds. He rested on his side, elbow propped, watching her as she brushed the dust from her skirt and laid her shawl beside their blanket. You spoke like you were born to it, he said. I was shaking so bad I could barely feel my feet. They didn't see that. They saw someone who stands steady. She lay back, her hair spreading behind her like dark straw. Do you think they'll agree to the winter trade? They will. The offer of horses and salt is strong. He moved closer, his hand resting lightly at her waist. You've given them something else, too. They see that I do not walk alone. She turned to face him. Is that what I am to you now? A symbol? No. His voice dropped. You're the breath I take before I speak. The weight that steadies my hand. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced a line along his collarbone, where the firelight showed the edge of an old scar. I used to think love was something you earned by enduring pain, she whispered. But this feels different. That's because it is, he said. They left the next morning with handshakes and bundles of dried fruit and sweetgrass tucked into their packs. The ride back was quiet, the kind of silence that didn't ask to be filled. When they reached the valley again, the sky was pale with evening, and the camp was lit with small fires and the smell of roasted squash. As they dismounted, one of the elders approached with a wrapped bundle. For you, he said to Priscilla. From Naz Cha. Inside was a length of deer hide, dyed blue-gray, with a circle of feathers stitched over the heart. A marriage robe. Priscilla looked up at Leotie, her breath caught behind her ribs. He nodded once, but his voice was steady. Only if you choose it. She held the robe against her chest. I already have. They married beneath the cottonwoods 3 days later, with the whole valley gathered to witness. There was no preacher, no paper. Only the presence of the people who had taken her in, and the man who had waited without asking. Naz Cha painted a line of ochre across Priscilla's cheeks, and the silver-haired woman from the southern band returned to braid feathers through her hair. Leotie wore a breastplate of bone and beads, and over his shoulder hung a quiver she had stitched for him by hand. They spoke no vows. They looked into each other's eyes and stood still, and that was enough. Later, as night fell and drums thudded low against the cliffs, Priscilla danced with the children, her laughter rising above the rhythm. Leotie watched from the fire, his gaze soft, his mouth curved just slightly. When she returned to him, her hands still warm from the circle, he folded her into his arms and rested his chin atop her head. "I never imagined this," she said into his chest. "Neither did I." He kissed her hair. "But I hoped." Years passed, and the valley remained. The rains returned each summer, and the earth gave its gifts in maize and medicine. Priscilla became a woman others sought for counsel, quiet, firm, and known for her sharp memory and calm voice. She taught the girls to stitch bead by bead, to plant by the moon, and to speak from the center of their chest. Leotie was often gone for days, sometimes weeks, riding the old trails with messengers or traders. But he always returned, and when he did, he found her waiting by the stream, her feet wet, her eyes steady. They built their lodge near the edge of the cottonwood grove, where the stream curved and the light lingered longest in the evening. In time, they welcomed a daughter with dark eyes and strong lungs, and 2 years later, a son who came into the world during a thunderstorm and laughed before he cried. They grew old in the valley, their hair silvering, their hands marked by the work of seasons. And always, they loved not in a way that demanded or burned, but in a way that endured, like the land itself. No fist ever found her again. No fire rose behind her. Only warmth. Only the quiet strength of a life chosen freely, and a love that never once asked her to be anything but exactly who she was. And in that she found everything.